highlights, but a lot of the highlights came afterwards as legends from Red Wing history took to the ice and took to the podium. Steve Yzerman spoke, as did our next guest. He simply is the greatest coach in the history of hockey.
History of sports.
I was going to say, in my opinion, the greatest coach in the history of team sports, and he joins us here on the Jamie and Stoney Show. He's the one and only Scotty Bowman on 97.1 The Ticket. Hey, Scotty, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How cool was last night, Scotty?
Yeah, it was worth waiting for sure. And I noticed most of the fans, there wasn't very many that left, so it was a good ending for sure.
What is it about Joe Louis? Is it the building itself, or is it just the memories and the people that made that place so special?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. Obviously, that you see the same people there; they don't leave. All the people that you saw. I mean, I left. I left coaching in '02, and you just walk through wherever you go. It doesn't matter where you are. You see the same people. They stay on. So, it's been a historic team. The longevity of a lot of the players. Players wanted to come there, and players wanted to stay. So, with that formula, and you had terrific ownership, and it was, I guess, not all 38 years, but certainly the last 25 of that was terrific.
Scotty Bowman with us here on 97.1 The Ticket. Scotty, you mentioned during your speech last night two names. You mentioned a lot of names, actually, but two names in particular were Nicholas Lidstrom and Steve Yzerman, two captains back-to-back. You had the pleasure of coaching both those guys. I mean, did those two, in a way, set the tone for everybody else? You had so many great players that you were able to coach here in Detroit, but are those the two guys who you think kind of set the tone?
Well, for sure. I mean, I don't know of any team in history that would have two players that would have played over 20 seasons with the same team, and never played anywhere else. I doubt if that'll ever happen again. And it just shows, they were both in history. I mean, there's been some great Red Wing players. Go back, I was fortunate enough and young enough to see them in the 50s, and I was growing up in Montreal, and the rivalry was terrific. I used to go up there as a teenager and just watch these players. I used to go up early to the Forum because I don't know. I guess because both teams were always battling out for the cup, and I used to watch these players come out of the taxi cabs, 3 or 4 at a time, well dressed, coming in to play a terrific team. So. It's so much history. I didn't know I'd ever end up with the Red Wings because I started with Montreal in 1956 full time as a junior coach, and I stayed there 10 years before I went into the NHL with expansion. Then I went back for 8 more years. But I spent 15 terrific years in Detroit, 9 as a coach, and I stayed with the team as a consultant for another 6 years before I went with my son in Chicago. So it's a special place for me for sure. My daughter went to Michigan, and there's so much ties here for us.
You mentioned Steve Yzerman. There's always been this, I don't know if it's a myth or whatever, that you guys came close to trading him after, I guess, the failures of '94. Was there any truth to that?
Not really. You know what happened? The Red Wings had appointed a president, Bill Evo, a really nice gentleman. He only stayed a year or two. There was not much work for that position because every other position was filled. And he used to go to the board meetings, and he did come back once. It was more or less Ottawa was just starting in the league, and they were grasping at straws, looking to see how they could start their franchise. And Steve came from Ottawa. Although he played junior in Peterborough, Ontario, he still was an Ottawa native. And he came back and mentioned that Ottawa, if we ever wanted to trade Steve Yzerman, and I talked to Bill Evo. I hadn't known him very long, and I said, Bill, it's a no-brainer because it wouldn't matter if he was even available ever. Mr. Ilitch treated Steve like a son, another son. They were that close. And I said, he's been the franchise. Well, he came in '82. This is probably around the mid-'90s. And I said, but those things have legs when it gets into the out of the privacy of however it happened. I don't remember, but no, I just said to Bill, there's no chance that this will ever happen, whether it was a reality or not. I don't think so. I think it was just a figment of somebody in Ottawa. I mean, I can't blame them. They were looking to start their franchise, but it wasn't going to happen for sure.
Scotty Bowman with us, joining us here on the Troy Laser Hotline. Jamie and Stoney, 97.1 The Ticket. Stoney brought up this story, so I guess everyone's asking of your favorite Joe memory. And, of course, you were famously booed then at the opening night the next year for even considering this. But then you guys, of course, won in 97. Yzerman said he thought the booing was ridiculous, and you got a great standing ovation from the Joe crowd that night. And then, of course, your career as a coach ended in 2002 when you were able to win the Stanley Cup and then tell everybody you were retiring. Is that last moment in 02, is that your Joe moment, Scotty? Is that the one that stands out?
I think the first Cup, and I know there's been some queries of the greatest moment in Red Wing history of it. That's a Joe. Winning the Cup in 97, when I think back, I think going in, our expectations maybe weren't. We'd been swept in 95 by an underdog team, New Jersey Devils, and we were playing the number one team in the league at that time, the Philadelphia Flyers. They were still rolling along with Eric Lindros and the Legion of Doom line, and we went into Philly and won the first two games, and that was quite an accomplishment right in itself. And then getting Game 3, and then I just remember getting ready for Game 4. I was always nervous about, you get nervous in a lot of games, but I was always more nervous when we were trying to win a fourth game, knowing how close you could come, and especially when you're up 3-0. People were driving around the suburbs of Detroit and the city with brooms hanging out of their trucks and cars. And I was saying, boy, we still have another game to win. But so I think the 97 Cup win, but I would put the 02 win was special because we had an Olympic break in February, and I had thought about it leaving previously for about 2 or 3 years before that, wondering when my time would be up. So I had made up my mind, though, and I didn't want to have a circus, so I didn't tell anybody. But I was pretty convinced that it made it pretty easy, obviously, going out with a win. But I was pretty determined that I was going to try something else, And so the 02 and 97 are really special. And, I mean, every cup is special for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just curious when you see where the Red Wings are now, realistically, how long do you think it'll take to get back to where at least they're competitive for a Stanley Cup, and how do you get back to where they were?
Well, they have a handful of players. They're not like an expansion team that's starting up because, when you think of some of the younger players, I know he didn't have a banner year this year, but Dylan Larkin, I was sitting with Red Berenson last night. He was remarking the fact that he's just 20 years old. And, he had him as a freshman in Michigan. And young Mansa. It'll take a couple of years. The division, though, if you look at the division, they're in a fairly tough division. But, Toronto's got a lot of young players finishing down near the bottom 3 or 4 years in a row. You get a number 1 pick like Matthews, a number 4 pick like Marner, another eighth pick overall. The Red Wings still have Mansa. They got young Larkin. They got Athanasiou, and they've got Jimmy Howard might come back. He's 32 or 33, but he's still a goalie that could do it. I think they got some good drafts this year, but those drafts are going to take about 2 to 3 years, unless you get a lower pick in the top. I'm going to say top 7 or 8. That player usually needs a couple of years before he can look at Manfred. That's the best example. He was drafted around 18 or 20. So I don't think the division, though. Ottawa, Montreal, they've patched up pretty well. They're in the playoffs this year. Tampa's got a good young team. Florida's got some young players, but not a lot more than Detroit. So when you look at the division they're in, I mean, that's what the first thing you got to do is you got to look at that division. That other division, the Atlantic Division, is so tough. I mean, you got established teams, Washington, Pittsburgh. They're not going to go away. Columbus has been rebuilding. So I would think going into the new building will be pretty exciting. Can it be an advantage again, like the Joe was? That's hard to say because new buildings are not as I don't know. For the visiting team, it's going to be a lot different for them coming into all the the good things that are going to be with a new building. But I think they'll be in the mix. They were in the mix this year. I think they really suffered with the loss of Howard. They were counting on him,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's close. They got to battle it out though.
Hey, Scotty, we really appreciate the time. Great having you back in Detroit last night, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you.